Alrighty, good afternoon, everybody. Happy Sunday. Happy Tiff Talks Sunday. Today is October the 31st, and as promised, today is our recap of thus far Tiff Talks Linear Sequence. And for those of you that are new to this platform, I am Tiffany, owner and operator of Tiff Talks and host of this live podcast. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
I can. I am Kenshay Saxton. I am the executive talk partner of Tiff Talks. And yeah, happy Tiff Talk Sunday.
Yes, so we are here to do a recap of this great season that we started some time ago. We took a bit of a hiatus, so we wanted to be able to come back and share with you guys really things that stood out to us, and also kind of prepare you for the tail end of this season. We decided to discuss this season a linear sequence, being able to really focus on our bloom, being able to apply the tools, being able to gauge things that are going to till our soil, that's going to challenge us, that's going to cause us to grow, that's going to put us in a position to elevate. So we started out this season by discussing first accountability. And this is something that Shay and I discuss pretty much all the time, but talking about it in an open forum with our talk guests really brought a lot of insight in regards to truly defining what accountability is, but giving the insight to how accountability is something that we really kind of learn at an early age, even before we understand or even recognize the word accountability itself. So for me, one thing that I really appreciated about the conversation with Rodney is that he shared a lot of his own kind of childhood experiences. And sharing those childhood experiences, he talked about how he, being the eldest of his siblings, he was held accountable for so many things, whether it be coming home, making sure that the house was clean, making sure that his siblings was taken care of while his mom was working, bringing home good grades. And he'd gotten to the point in this accountability journey at a young age that he was no longer required to have to like show proof of being held accountable. It was just a set expectation and kind of agreement to a certain extent that he and his mom had. So for me, it really caused me to kind of think back into my own childhood and some responsibilities that I had that have caused me to be able to really recognize what accountability looked like at an early age, but also how I've grown as an adult into being accountable.
I didn't have to show it. I didn't have to show my work and all of that, but I was held accountable to a certain thing. She said, I go to work, you go to school. I bring home this, you bring home this. And that's just how it was. So for me, I maybe put it under the same column as discipline because it really involves being consistent over time.
Right.
Sure enough, you don't want to be held accountable like those people in that meeting you were in. You don't want to do the dishes. You don't want to work out. You don't want to save money. You want to spend it all.
Right.
It falls under discipline because it's something you actually have to put emphasis on, all the time and consistently until it's something that you just have with you. So you mentioned, is it learned? Sure enough, you learn discipline, but you learn discipline through doing it over and over and over. So that's where accountability comes from for me.
I would have to agree that for me, in my perspective and kind of my truth, is accountability is a learned behavior. You learn it because you see it, you model it, you get to a point where it becomes a part of your everyday life. I didn't necessarily grow up with siblings in the household, but my mom worked really, really early.
And I think when Rodney was speaking and he talked heavily on that, accountability was character, and we build character through our entire life. And I also heard him say that as your peer group, they don't necessarily it's not necessarily you have to be accountable. It's preferred, but you know, within yourself, you hold yourself accountable so that they would hold themselves accountable, and then everybody becomes accountable.
Right. And you know, in this day and time, so often people talk about accountability partners. And she's one of mine, so we know what that relationship looks like. Right. We know what the exchange and the give or take is. But he also talked about how everyone is not always ready for what that exchange may look like. Right. Some people aren't receptive of that head check, you know, and that just really is dependent on where they are in their life, but also where the relationship stands as well. But to truly have, I would say, that vulnerability with someone in a friendship and a accountability relationship holds true to being able to say, this is the expectation and I'm going to hold you accountable for that. You may not like it. You may not agree with it. It may cause friction, but for your own better good, for your best interest, because I know what goals you have set for yourself. I'm going to hold you accountable and make that expectation clear. So Rodney like really brought a lot of insight to the table. Some things that really kind of stood out to me, and what he talked about in his talk time was being able to allow yourself to be used as a tool. And that was big for me, because so often we don't really kind of resonate on how you yourself being a person is a tool and being used as a tool for someone or for a purpose in itself.
Because he spoke heavily on the work relationship, as he did and quoted. He said that when you go to work, you play your part. So you are accountable for a tad bit in making sure that your work goes as planned, making sure that you fulfill those tasks at work. And then I think coming home from that, you have to be accountable to yourself first, in order to be that accountability partner for somebody else.
Right.
So he spoke on personal life and work life, and it's a difference. Accountability looks different in every facet of life.
Right.
Whether it be work, it's a little part you play. At home, you're accountable to yourself, to your family. If you're married or in a relationship, to your person, to your kids, but most importantly, to yourself. Right. And you have to hold yourself accountable in order to maintain life. I think accountability plays a heavy part in that.
Right. And I think when it comes down, because this topic really kind of surfaced because of a work situation that I, ran across in my trade. And we really kind of touched on why that word accountability is such a taboo topic. And he talked about if truly people understood the bigger picture, like even if there is a delegated portion that you're responsible for or that you're expected to fulfill, if you understood the bigger picture of what your portion brings to the table, then accountability will be more receptive amongst people in general.
Because it's not acceptable in certain situations. Work. No one wants to be held accountable because everybody feels that they know what they're doing. This is their job and this is what, but if you're accountable, then, yes, it's your job, but at the same time, this is a work circle.
Right.
So if we have to hold true to that accountability amongst each other in order to get the end game. The end goal. We can't not be accountable to one another, because then our job plays off of each other.
Right, that's true. And being one, like he said, to be used as a tool and sharpening that tool, you understand that kind of like my portion or my work, what I'm accountable for, what my expectations to fulfill is not evident if we aren't working together for the bigger picture.
I agree.
So Rodney definitely kind of tied into the next talk topic that we had, which was also a really, really, really good one, with Jennifer Haran. And that talk topic in itself was one that really resonated with me, because I am really kind of on a journey of practicing self-discipline, as we all are, but being able to be disciplined within myself and to hold myself accountable for the expectations that I have set forth. So for Jen, and talking with her, what really stood out to me is when it comes down to discipline and tying in accountability, was really kind of the consistency and the intentions that you set forth when it comes to self-discipline. You really have to be strategic about those things. And we made clear that all of the things that we're talking about, from accountability to productivity to discipline, they're all inside jobs.
Right.
And self-discipline is truly, truly, truly an inside job.
I agree. And I think Jen hit on growth when she speaks of self-discipline. And you can't be self-disciplined without accountability nor being productive with it. It's all tying in together.
Right.
And I think we did really good with tying all of these topics together, but self-discipline stood out a lot to me.
Right.
Because it's hard. I mean, it's not an easy task to be self-disciplined, because my people like to do certain things, but to be self-disciplined, I have to come home and I have to remember that I'm accountable to so much that my self-discipline plays a part.
Right. Would be so much easier for each and every person,
I agree.
So we're at the point of the conversation that I want to get your take on: how can people truly and in like a practical way learn to practice effectively self-discipline and discipline in their daily lives?
Knowing that no matter what, you set your ability to set yourself to do what you have to make things happen at the end of the day. No matter if you feel overwhelmed to everyday life, because you might get something thrown where you might have to stop one task to run and go do another task, or you might have to stop one goal to do the goal that you should have did before you did that first goal to get where you're trying to get to that next goal, because the way you listed your goals might not have fallen in place. You might have to do one that was on line 6 before you can do the one that's on line 2. Right. So it's a process. It's a process. And then it's a process where it's something that you need to start doing or try to do on an everyday basis. And once you do it on an everyday basis, it begins to not be a practice, but a habit.
Yep. And I think when it comes down to making things a habit, good habits are things that if you don't do it, you feel guilty about it.
Right.
So one thing for me, I have been like, oh, I need to start working out. I need to get myself together. I need to do this. I need to do that, whatever. And it had just kind of been in the back of my mind, to say the truth. And for me, it started with small steps. So I park on like the 7th floor at my job and I do it on purpose. One, because it gives me the opportunity to take the stairs up. Yes, 7 flights of stairs. And hey, the first week, baby, I was out of breath, taking breaks on every other, stairwell. But now I can go up to stairwell 5 before taking the break. Right. And for me, when like this past week, when I wasn't feeling as good as I usually do, I didn't do it, and I felt bad about it.
Right.
It's that good habit that I had practiced that I've been doing for at least maybe 3 weeks now. That it's a habit for me. It's a routine for me. And I'm one that does well with routines. I have to literally write everything down. If I don't write it down in my head, it don't happen. Down to like using my calendar, using the task feature on my phone, using like everything I make. Google does very well by me. Down to like writing out my bills. But these routines are things that help me to make sure that I stay disciplined in my spending habits. Stay disciplined and making sure that I'm following up on things, that I'm responding to emails, that I'm taking care of business and setting aside time for those things. And that's, things that work for me practically. When it boils down to self-discipline, I am very big on prayer and meditation. And even when my body doesn't feel good enough to, get down on my knees and pray. I have to find a way to create my own altar so
Right.
that I can pray and meditate, because I know my body may not feel it right now, but my body is going to thank me for it later.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel that when it comes down to both discipline generically and self-discipline, for me, it's all about routines. It's all about habits. It's all about setting a schedule, because that's what works for me. And that's what I know I'm going to be thanked for later, if that makes sense.
Right. And I like the idea, because I'm a writer. I write everything down. Because I always like to go back, and if something doesn't play out the way I wrote it down, then I try to go back and take notes to see what I can do different the next time I plan something out. That way you're getting in a habit of self-checking yourself.
Yeah.
So you're self-checking yourself on your discipline that you set. Mm-hmm. And then that way you can hold yourself accountable for certain things that you have going on in everyday life. Because if you can't hold yourself accountable, then you can't hold anybody else accountable for things that you expect from them.
Right. And when she talked about self-discipline, what I also appreciate is her really kind of zoning in on those self-checks, those head checks, and using those self-checks and those head checks as a way to measure your own progress. So being able to sit down and say, hey, these are my tasks for the day. This is where I'm going to set my intentions on what I'm going to get done and how I'm going to be proactive, how I'm going to be consistent in my day, how I'm going to be disciplined in my day to fulfill these goals and expectations, but also being able to say, hey, let me check in with myself to make sure that I've done what I'm able to do. As Shay mentioned, like, these things are not easy. Like, it's not an easy road to walk, because I know for a fact, if life doesn't do anything else, it is definitely going to challenge you. Yep. So self-discipline today, accountability today may not look like what it's going to look like tomorrow. And with that being so, you have to truly give the best pieces of yourself in order to make sure at that moment in time, right? You have to give those best pieces of yourself at that moment in time in order to fulfill these things truly.
And I think for self-discipline also, so on Sunday nights, I normally write down everything I'm going to do for the week. That's just how I maintain. So I have a book, and I go starting on Monday morning. Right. I outline what I'm going to do. I have to be productive. We're going to get into that. But I have to also be self-disciplined. Meaning I have to not only write these down, I need to write it down and make it plain. Right. As, my granny would tell me. So I write it down and then I speak it. Right. So in my wall, I don't know if y'all ever watched Being Mary Jane. Yeah. I love Being Mary Jane. And I took from her, she used to write like affirmations and different things all along her house. Right. So if you go into my bathroom, these sticky notes are up. So not only do I write them in my tablet, but then I make them known. So I put them down so I can see them. Right. And I don't have to pull out my book to see it. I have a calendar on my wall as you walk into my bedroom. And that's mainly just for me to make sure that I'm staying on that task. And then I'll go back and I'll say, okay, Monday came, girl, check. Yes, and so if I don't accomplish everything that I do set forth, I put forth that action to get it done. Right.
Or at least the effort.
The effort, yeah. Right. The effort to get it done.
I like that. Those are those good practices and good habits that she talked about. Being able to innate in your daily life good practices and good habits. For me, I'm also like a checklist type of person. So I'm like old school to the heart. I still like write out my bills in my calendar. Write them out in blue, check them off in red as they're paid. And I do that in a timely manner. I still wake up early on payday in order to pay my bills in a timely manner and pay my tithes first. So I know that that's the first thing coming out of my account. But when it comes down to the business, when it comes down to my trade, like you will see in my office, like I have a notepad that I write things on. And when people say, well, Tiffany, how did you remember that? Or how can you recall that? It's because I wrote it down. And you may not understand the
handwriting. I don't.
I was not going to say the handwriting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say the organized chaos on the notepad. But If I'm looking for a phone number of someone that I spoke to on Monday, I can go back and look through my notepad because I know I wrote it down. But that for me is, what I do. I too have a calendar in my room, like a weekly calendar, a dry erase board calendar where I go in and I write down like my task for that day, for that week. And throughout the week, I check in. Okay, this is what I've completed. This is what I need to complete. And I too may not be able to fulfill everything on that particular day. What's written down on Tuesday may not get done until Wednesday or Thursday, but it's there as a simple reminder.
I think I do that too. So, I get like the white piece of paper because I work for the church and my printer is like literally right behind me. So if I'm just thinking to just journal or write something down that I know I have, so I've already made that list. But if you come in my office, you be like, well, dang, girl, how you remember something? Like literally, it's not straight.
Right.
I might write it in a corner. If I'm in a meeting and I remember something, I just write it down. So when you get back to my desk, you're like, okay, this trash, right? I'm like, no. They be like, oh, girl, go find such and such number. Sister forgot me. And so I go get Sister forgot me number, and it's like literally on that piece of paper that I just scribbled on. Right. But it's just bringing those things into fruition.
Right. I like that. And one thing that also really stood out to me when we talked about discipline is about patience.
Yep.
And to be able to practice and have self-disciplines, you have to have patience.
And that's hard.
That's hard. That's very hard. I mean, really, when it comes down to discipline is not asking you to move all the time. Sometimes it's asking you to wait. Yep. Sometimes it's asking you to be patient. Yep. Sometimes it's asking you to stay still. And those things can be very challenging to do. But once you have those good habits, those steady practices, those checklists, those head checks, to measure your progress, even in a waiting period, even in practicing patience, that self-discipline is what's going to carry you into, this progressive state of a linear sequence.
Yeah, I agree. That was good.
So the final kind of episode that we presented was productivity. And productivity really, as you said, kind of tied everything together. Yeah. I agree. Like, we did a really good job of kind of outlining everything and kind of putting everything in a place where it will build up on each other. And this recap is meant to be able to give you just like a snippet of the things that we talked about, but also encourage you to go back and watch the full length episode. Like, these are just our favorite parts.
Like nuggets and gems.
Right, nuggets and gems. So we encourage you guys to go back and watch them. They are all on our Facebook page. JAY Kencole, KENCOLE marketing. Shameless plug for you guys to see. But as I was mentioning, the final kind of episode of the first half of this linear season was all about productivity.
Yes.
And our talk guests did an awesome job of first really kind of tying in how productivity plays into one's own intentions.
When it comes to consistency, what I'm finding is that consistency is a skill, a learned skill that has to be practiced. Most people don't just wake up consistent.
Right.
And definitely not consistent intentionally. It's a practice skill. So you talked a little bit earlier about small wins. In the same way, taking small steps, picking the one thing. So we have it sounds repetitive, but it really is what it is. So we think about all these different thoughts, all these different intentions, right? In order to be productive, you got to pick one to focus on, okay? In picking that one, you're going to pick that one action or that one series of actions that makes you productive. But the way that you go about implementing those actions will be the things that determine how consistent you are or are not. And it'll determine the speed at which you get to that goal. Wow. The same way you were talking about with Lizzo, setting that foundation, and then you have other people who rise super fast and fall super fast.
Right.
being productive is a thing that we have to do anyway. We do what we have to do to get whatever job done. But in the consistency part, I'm learning that your success is dependent on how much consistency you've built, like how disciplined you've become with being consistent, and how often you show up to do that one action of productivity. Does that make sense?
I like that. I like being able to identify it as a skill set.
Definitely a skill set. It's not natural for me. And even in dealing with clients and things, it's natural, or they've honed in on the consistency in other areas. Mm-hmm. But again, with the intention, being intentional about honing in on being consistent in money management.
Intentions.
And y'all know we love intentions.
Yes, we love intentions.
Everything always comes back to intentions. The fact that she said you have to have good intentions. No, she said she believed that everybody has good intentions. Mm-hmm. Now, whether those good intentions turn bad, later on in life, but everyone starts with good intentions.
Right.
So with those good intentions, that gives you the lane or the pathway to become productive.
Right. And when it comes down to intentions, she really kind of shared one of her strategies, which is kind of similar to what Kenshay and I do, is really kind of have a brain dump. Yeah. And write out all the intentions or all the things that you are set for yourself in order to accomplish. Write it down, make it plain, and then go back and prioritize those things. Something that really kind of stood out that I don't think I really zoned in on until we had that conversation with her is that when it comes down to being productive, not any one person is productive consistently. So, yeah. and I mean, that may be a hard pill to swallow, right? But that is likely the reality. Like, no one person is always productive all the time. And she was saying that productivity oftentimes comes in seasons. Yeah. So depending on what season in your life that you're in, productivity, just like accountability, just like discipline, will look completely different for you. But in whatever shape, form, or fashion that it comes in, it's up to you to set them intentions, to make sure that you're zoning in on those things, prioritizing those things, and being able to fulfill those expectations.
I agree. I think when she spoke of consistency, meaning for me, I'm productive at hand, or at least it starts that way. But sometimes, like she said, it's a season.
Right.
So if it's a season that I'm productive, then I'm not consistent. So for me, consistency is a big struggle that I have when it becomes to productivity.
I think, and we talk about this all the time as well, being able to extend ourselves grace. As much as we extend other people grace. So like when something happens or something is out of whack, when it comes to other people, then we'll freely say, oh, that's okay. We'll work through it, or, we'll manage. But when it comes down to ourselves, we beat ourselves up. When the actuality is, we need to extend ourselves grace just as much as we extend other people. And when it comes down to extending grace, we have to allow ourselves to be okay with that, if that makes sense. Understanding and knowing that my productivity now will come in seasons, and looking forward to those seasons is something that makes me feel better about the ideal of productivity.
And you build the consistency.
Right. You build on consistency. So for me, one thing that I learned doing my test prep when I was preparing for these exams back to back was the idea that quantity does not mean quality. So for instance, if I'm setting aside an hour of study time a day, But in that hour of study time, I'm only being productive. I'm only having a good 20 minutes of quality study time. Then that other 40 minutes is just a waste. So for me, it's taught me a very, very, very important lesson that I've applied in different facets in different areas of my life, that to value quality over quantity. And when we talk about productivity, I think that's something that we need to also make mention of. That when we're being productive, when we're in this season of productivity, that it's gonna be all about quality, not necessarily quantity.
I agree.
Moment of transparency, like I came home and like crashed yesterday, and in crashing, of course, I was up at like 11:30 at night, and I was up from like 11:30 to about 4, but in that, what you would call the midnight hour, I got a lot of stuff done. I was able to, read about 3 chapters in a book that I'm reading. I was able to finish an outline. I was able to check some emails, respond to some emails. I know some people, when they woke up this morning and it was like, why am I getting an email at 3 a.m. this morning, was kind of shocked. But that quality time for me, really allowed me to get some things done, allowed me to check some things off that I needed to do.
I agree with all of that.
So insomnia is not always a bad thing. Yeah. It's how you use it. So another kind of thing that I would think this entire first half of the season that resonated with me, and something that I shared during the last live episode, was that a quote that was posted by one of our talk audience on IG. And I'm going to read the quote so I make sure I get it right. So the quote is, "Commitment and accountability closes the gap between intentions and results." And for me, that really resonated with me. And that is something that I immediately identified with as being productive. That is something that, I'm holding true to myself and holding myself accountable for.
I agree.
So understanding that gap in between is what's going to carry me to the next kind of stage in this linear sequence.
I agree.
Okay. So what is thus far your takeaway from the first half of this season?
That one, it all ties in together. Being accountable, you have to be self-disciplined, and you have to be productive. Accountability is character. Self-discipline is growing that character. And productivity is being consistent with accountability and your self-discipline.
I like that. I like that all of your testament are ways to truly sharpen those tools within yourself, and being able to truly zone in how those skill sets and character traits allow you to truly be a self-serving, all that you can be, and being a self-serving tool. For me, my takeaway thus far throughout this linear sequence has been the progressive state does not require for you to make this big move. I think it's important that when we talk about this linear sequence, that it is small steps, is good habits, is setting intentions, is consistency, is what's going to sharpen our tools to take us to the next level and ultimately elevate our bloom. So that is my takeaway thus far. I'm looking forward to the second half of this season. I'm a bit nervous, I must say. And that is because we are truly talking about 2 things that we're both on a journey of doing. One of them being resilience, which I know for sure we practice on a daily basis. Resilience, but also healing. I have been on a healing journey this last year. healing some things for myself and within myself. So to be able to present these last two final talk topics, I'm nervous because I feel like it's gonna be very emotional.
Very
But
touching.
Yes, it's gonna be emotional. It's going to allow or show a side of vulnerability for myself as a host. But that's what this platform is all about, like being able to tackle these taboo topics, being able to have these uncomfortable conversations in a platform that will bring education, that will bring insight, that will bring awareness to these things, ultimately to empower us all. So that kind of wraps up this recap.
Yes.
We are looking forward to you guys joining us for all new episodes. The first being next Sunday, which is going to be the 7th of November, with our returning, I think she's probably like one that has been like in rotation for forever.
I think so.
And always a good time. Heather Cherie will be joining us to discuss resilience and self-care. So that is going to be an awesome talk time. I encourage you guys to set your notifications and to stay tuned because it is going to be good. And then our final season finale will be healing.
Yes.
And that episode is going to be with Pastor Brandon. So I am excited, as I said, to wrap up this season. I encourage you guys to remain connected, to remain in the know, set your notifications, follow us on all social media platforms, on Instagram at JKC Marketing, on Facebook at JAY Ken Cole, KENCOLE Marketing, and then of course on YouTube, and that is JKC Podcast. So announcements that we have, if you have been kind of tuned into our IG, you know that we are actively working on volume 4. Yes, volume 4 of Tiff Talks Community Empower magazine. This volume of the editorial is going to close out and round out this actual power themed edition. And we are working on zoning in and securing those that are going to be featured. And all of the features, invites that we've sent out are in good standing and have accepted our invite. So we're excited to present that to you guys. This particular editorial is going to be all about those that have invested in power. So new entrepreneurs that have ventured into business, into entrepreneurship within this last year pandemic type era. So that is what that is going to be all about. So you can be on the lookout for that. It's going to be debuting December of this year, mid-December. And we will also have ad space available. So make sure that you reach out to myself, to Kenshay, for ad space, because that will be available as well in this edition.
And if you have not purchased your copies of the previous editions, please do so.
Yes, please do so. We do have some extra copies. And shout out to you guys, our Talk community. I know I mentioned this during the last Talk Tuesday, but we have had 4 consecutive weeks of the Harvest in Power editorial.
Yes.
4 consecutive weeks since the moment of debuting. And that is a blessing in itself. So we appreciate you guys, your investment in us, your support, your love, your purchases. Keep them coming. We appreciate it. And you guys stay tuned for much more.
Much more.
All right. In the meantime, we encourage you guys to keep talking, and we thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Yes.
Have a good evening.